Welcome, everyone. Today's topic is do's and don'ts, ways to win the engagement game forever. And with me is Dr. Dan Harrison. And I just like to say that Dan is one of the most innovative thinkers on the topic of engagement. And I'm going to turn it to Dan because he's going to share with you his point of view about the engagement game and how you can think about it differently inside your company.
Okay, welcome everybody. Let's jump right in. So I think the first thing to do is look, what is employee engagement? So my perspective on it is it's a psychological condition in which employees are motivated to go above and beyond expectations to fulfill the organization's goals. And the key here is that it's actually a psychological condition. So it's something that's internal to the employee, and it's, in my view, driven by the employee. So how do we get employees to become engaged? How do we create that psychological condition is really the key question. And so let's look at what we've done historically related to creating engagement. So traditional survey questionnaire method is what's been traditionally used. Employees rate their manager via an anonymous questionnaire. Then the data is used to analyze the manager's behaviors. There's diagnostics about it. And the manager training is separate. So there's typically no training that goes with the engagement survey. And but the organization can add it to it. Sometimes they'll be able to identify specific needs of specific managers, but usually not. They usually don't do that. So that's basically the core of that method. So now I'd like to have you look at the Harrison method, how we look at it, and what's the difference really between that and the survey method. So first of all, our view is that employees clarify their engagement goals via a questionnaire app. So the most important thing is that the employees' goals are understood, because those are what's actually going to engage the person in the position. Employees learn how to achieve their goals via a personalized app. So therefore, what we discovered is it's one thing to understand your goals, and it's another thing to understand how to work with those goals within an organization. So therefore, we've created an app that will help employees to really understand, all right, you want this, but how are you going to get it? And what are the behaviors that you're going to need to get it? And since we do behavioral assessment, we're able to assess what are the behaviors that are hindering people from getting it. And therefore, each app is completely personalized to the individual. There's no two that are the same. It's completely personalized. So as a result, later, after employees go through a process of really understanding their goal, how they can best achieve it, employees make a request to their manager via the app, and basically says, for example, I'd like to have some development opportunities, and these are the ones that I'm looking to have. And so the manager receives this request, and then the manager reads the guidance. There's a set of guidance that goes along with the request that says, okay, for the manager, this is what you need to consider when someone makes a request for development opportunities, and this is how it's best to approach it. So it's a real quick summary guidance. It's not a separate training that occurs that people have to remember. So because every time they get a request, that guidance will be right in front of them. Okay. Then the managers dialogue and they negotiate with employees about their goals. So this is a basic overview of the process. And then they both seek alignment to achieve mutual goals. So the key here is that employees are driven to achieve their own goals. And if you can align the organization's goals with the employees' goals, then you have a process where you've got alignment. And with that alignment, employees become engaged. And engagement and retention is achieved. So there's also a retention factor. So it's pretty interesting what happens is when the employee feels like there's a discussion about them, it's what's important to them, this is my goals, they're automatically connected, and there's automatically a feeling of oh, somebody cares about what I want. And that in itself is engaging. But by going through the process of looking at the specific goals of the individual for their employment and their career, you're able to then dig deep into, okay, well, how do they go about to achieve those goals? So with a survey method, there's a premise that says engagement's based on the manager's behavior. So engagement is dependent upon the manager. And the focus is on the manager's behavior with the questions in the survey. As a result, the surveys need to be anonymous. So when the employee fills out the questionnaire, they never actually get anything back related to what they completed on the questionnaire. They simply, it's data they put in and it's gone, and it's anonymous, and nobody ever knows what they individually put in. So you're not actually engaging the employees in the process of engagement, which is not a good thing. The data is not actionable on an employee level. So from the employee point of view, I'm putting in this thing called engagement survey, which I, in fact, don't care about anyway, because what is engagement to me? Engagement is something that the organization wants. It's not necessarily something that I think about. I don't come to work every day and think about how do I get engaged. And then the result is the organization, they get some feedback to the manager. So it's essentially like a 180 feedback. But typically there's no training included in it. And so the manager just sees the feedback that says, okay, you're rated this way and you're rated that way. And there's, typically not a lot they're going to do with that unless they get really supported to really, take that and do something with it. Employees are not involved except to complete the survey. So the crazy thing is we're trying to engage employees, but they're actually not really involved in the process except for finishing a survey, which they don't get any feedback about at all. And the result is there's minimal impact on engagement. And, over the 30 plus years that people have been doing engagement surveys, it really hasn't changed much of the engagement. And it's I would say slightly increased. How much of that's due to just social desirability or repeating the same thing over again, or maybe it's due to the managers getting a little bit better at what they do. But basically, there's a minimal impact on engagement. Certainly nothing that we would close to what we would like to see. So with the Harrison Career Goal Method, it's a different premise that engagement is based on goal alignment. It's based on the alignment between the employee's goals and the organization's goals. So basically, employment is a connection between it's a relationship between the employee and the employer. And the employee has certain goals and desires in that relationship, and the organization has certain goals and desires. And when we're able to fit those together and create alignment with those, we're much, much more likely to get engagement. So the focus is on aligning goals and expectations. So what does the organization expect from the employee? What does the employee expect from the organization? It's really a business relationship. There's no need to be anonymous. It's really a matter of, you can talk about your goals, you can talk about what's important to you, just the organization does all the time. They rarely dig deep into the employees' goals, but those goals can be discussed, and there you can look at a survey that makes it more clear and enables you to sort of go forward with looking at how they can be addressed. The data is actionable. So on the employee level, the employee fills in a questionnaire, and they're able to take action based on what their goals are. And it's actionable in terms of the relationship between the employee and the employer as well. The employee receives training to fulfill their goals. So the app takes the person into the training, start looking at the employee's goals, starting with the strongest goals, from the employee's point of view, how well they're fulfilled. Then it typically goes into what are the employee's behaviors that are helping them to achieve that goal, and what are the behaviors that are hindering them from achieving the goal. So, for example, if I want development opportunities, one of the traits that I'm going to look at related to development opportunities is self-improvement. So I may want development opportunities, but maybe I have some hesitance or resistance related to self-improvement, and that's probably not going to support me very well to get development opportunities, or at least make use of the development opportunities. So for each goal, we'll look at typically 7 or 8 different traits or competencies that enable you to fulfill that goal as an employee. And it's completely personalized. So the manager receives a training on their side as well, but the training is unique because it only occurs when they get a request from the employee. So at the end of the employee's training, it typically provides some requests like, I'd like to have, these are my priorities in terms of development opportunities, and I'd like to have a discussion about it. And the manager will see that, but at the same time they see that, there'll be this summary of how should a manager best handle when an employee requests development opportunities. So they don't have to go through a long training, try to remember it all, and then apply it. It gets put in front of them right at the same time that they really need it. And so they're able to respond to the employee's request, and typically they'll have a discussion with the employee after reviewing this sort of summary on best practices for handling development opportunities requests. So employees are fully involved throughout the process, and that in itself is very powerful in terms of retaining employees and engaging employees, because they're engaged in discussion which probably they've never experienced with employment prior to that. So they probably never had an employer who looked at, well, what's important to you? Why are you here? Why do you come to work? And let's look at the details of it, and let's look at how we can build this relationship so that you can get what you want out of it. And we know what we want. We have our goals, and we're driven by our goals. But let's try to tie our goals to your goals and see what we can do. So the difference here is employees actually become engaged, and they also become retained as well, because there's very, very little competition out there for this kind of dialogue. Most organizations don't do it. To their peril, they don't do it. And what this does is it creates a whole system, not just saying, well, let's have some dialogue about your career goals, but it creates a whole system about how to do it, what are the details of it, and how to fully expand on it and get clarity on both sides.
One of the things that you and I talked about that I think is I think really one of the most fascinating things that I've heard you say is that even if you are not able to meet the employee's career goals, just having the conversation is engaging.
Absolutely.
So say more about that, because I think what you're really doing here is you're turning the notion of anonymity on its head. And so talk about that. You're saying, I want to personalize, I want to understand. And even if I can't meet that goal, the person becomes engaged. So say more about that, because I think that's really, truly fascinating.
Well, first of all, we measure about 18 different possible goals. So employees typically don't have just one goal. They have several goals, and they give different importance to those goals. So when you start to address what those are, first of all, the employee themselves need to get clarity about what those are. So part of taking the survey enables them to get that kind of clarity. Okay, this was important to me, that one's important to me. And interestingly enough, most organizations assume that, well, the deal here is that we pay you and then you do what we want. And so it must be that your primary goal is money. And so we're going to pay you and do what you want. And if we think you're doing a good job, we'll pay you more. And so that's a lot of the premise that it typically occurs. But the reality is, employees have really different goals, and on average, getting higher pay is number 4 or 5 out of 18 or so. So that's not their priority. So there's a whole lot of other things that employees might want out of employment that you can discuss that has a lot of value to the employer, some of which don't require any kind of additional payment at all. And understanding what's important to that employee is the key to generating the engagement, and it's the key to retention. So, and as I said, there's very little competition out there for doing it. Yeah.
I just think it's a really interesting premise. Even if you don't fulfill what I'm looking for today, the fact that you're talking to me about it is what makes the difference, because I'm involved in the process.
Well, what I found makes employees engaged is when they feel like they're making progress toward their goals. So since they have, typically have 5, 6, 7, 8 goals that are important to them related to employment, they don't necessarily have to fulfill them all. If they fill, the majority of them would be fantastic for them. So you don't have to worry about saying, well, this one I can't really fulfill. But you've got, a bunch of others here which I can. I think we can work toward these. So, and for the most part, people will greatly appreciate that, and they will, respond to that, and they'll appreciate the honesty of it. And there may be a few cases where you have employees where you can't fulfill any of their goals, and which is very, very unlikely. But at least there's a sense of, I really care about trying to do that. And the other really important thing is, fulfilling your goals is not just my burden as a manager. Fulfilling your goals is your responsibility. So what I'm going to do as a manager is I'm going to help to show you how you can fulfill your goals. But you're the one that has the responsibility. And that is the huge difference between the engagement phenomena, the survey phenomena, and this approach. Is with the survey phenomena, the premise is the manager is responsible for engaging their employees. And if they behave in certain ways, employees are going to be engaged. But in this process, the employee is responsible for their own engagement. The manager will be able to look at what their goals are and help convey what they need to achieve their goals. But when the employee is pursuing their own goals that are aligned with the organization, that's when they become engaged. So in the process, engagement happens.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting.
Okay, so with the survey method, there's external implementation. So because it's anonymous, typically it's implemented externally by an external party to help to guarantee that anonymity. Whereas with the Harrison method, it's an easy internal implementation. And it can start out with employees, they can enter stuff in it. It's their own app. It doesn't have to be shared, but only when they're ready to say, okay, I'd like to have, for example, this kind of development opportunity, or I think I'm ready for a pay increase or whatever, they ping the manager, and the manager gets pinged, and then they start to implement it. So it's set up so it doesn't bother the manager with a lot of stuff. And when the employees do go for the talk to the manager, then they do it by knowing what they're doing. So they already have a lot of clarity at that point about what they can ask, how to ask it, and how to go about dealing with the manager. So this saves the manager a lot of time. So with the surveys, the results are not visible to the employee. But with the Harrison method, the results are visible to the employee. In fact, the employee just completely works with that, with those results themselves. The employees are not involved with the survey except to fill out the questionnaire. And with the Harrison method, employees, there's a central to the process. They're the core, they're the initiator of the process as well. And employees are not trained with the survey method, so there's no additional training. In the Harrison method, employees get trained in how to achieve their goals within the organization. So it walks them through a process of looking at their own tendencies. It's personalized, and it says, this is how you can achieve higher pay, or this is how you can achieve advancement, or this is how you can request working remotely, or whatever it is that your goal is. The managers are not trained either with the survey method. You can add training to it, but it's not included with the survey method. But in the Harrison method, the managers are trained. And in fact, they're trained in the process. So in the process of dealing with the requests, they're getting training automatically that's occurring. So it doesn't really take much time out of their day or whatever to look at that. It takes a couple of minutes just to look at the overview. And when they get a request, and by then they'll start to learn it as they get more of the same kind of request. So with the surveys, engagement is evaluated on the feedback about the manager. So the assumption is that if the manager is rated well by the employee, that somehow the employee is engaged. And with the Harrison method, it's very different. Engagement is evaluated on the employee feeling that they're making progress with their goals. It's a very different perspective. So there's 3 steps to the engagement and retention. First of all, the employee enters an app and does a goal assessment and receives related training. Then the employee makes a request to the manager via the app. And then the manager gets a mini training, very brief, takes about 2-3 minutes to read through it, and about how to handle that request. And typically they do a face-to-face meeting. And then they work out how to deal with the employee's request, what's important to the employee, and how the organization can respond. The employee's expectations and goals, I'll give you some example. These are some of the ones that we have in our questionnaire. Development opportunities, that's actually the most popular one. 90% of employees have development opportunities as one of their important goals or expectations for employment. Advancement opportunities is also very popular. They want to know, am I able to advance in this organization? And if so, how? What are those opportunities? So that discussion is very bringing people into belonging. A leadership role is another one. People are often thinking about, okay, what's my opportunity for a leadership role? And that isn't necessarily advancement, but they can be leadership roles. Higher pay is one of the next ones, usually typically 4 or 5. Do I have the opportunity to earn higher pay? And if so, how do I do it? What is expected to me in order to earn higher pay? And that's a fantastic discussion to have, which is extremely motivating. Appreciation and recognition, free for the organization to give and easy. But knowing, for example, if appreciation and recognition is the employee's most important expectation, that's going to tell you something that it's important to respond to that. So, having my opinions valued is another one, typically rated highly by employees. Having autonomy is another one. So people want autonomy, but they don't really have a good idea about how to go about it, how to ask for it, how to approach it, what it means, am I ready for autonomy, or autonomy where, in what aspect of my work. So the app helps the employee to work out those things before they have the discussion with the manager. And then with the discussion with the manager, it starts to get even more clear. And you're able to work out, okay, this is what I think can work and help you in that regard. Being informed is another one that's reasonably popular. Having a capable leader is an important one. So that's within our system. We tackle that in a different way as we look at how the employee can handle different things that they would typically want from their manager. So, for example, if they don't have priorities, or if their priorities are not clear, we don't just say, okay, use this as a way of complaining about your manager, the priorities are not clear. We say, okay, well, you take a stab at your employee, at your priorities. You try to lay out what you think the priorities are, and then you present that to your manager, and you can then have a discussion on it. So even with the sort of things that people would often rate their manager, you can actually turn those into actionable things that the employee can do that supports the manager, and also, fulfills their own expectation. Working remotely is another option that we have in the system. Some employees would like to work remotely, some full-time, some part-time, whatever. Some organizations allow that, can be negotiated to do that. Another one is work that benefits society. Some people are very strong in wanting to do work that's meaningful to them, to benefit others or society. So there can be some discussions around that, how to get that in their work, or in some cases, people will need to do that outside of work. But typically, organizations do provide some kind of a service to society, and tying that into the employees to understand, well, what is that and what's their role in that, can be very useful as well. Receiving frankness, which is a really interesting one. What we found basically is that a lot of employees are reasonably unfulfilled on this factor, that instead of what we would think is that they want managers to be respectful and diplomatic, they actually have a higher request for managers to be frank and straightforward. They want to know where they stand. So that's a very strong one for a lot of employees. Having a stable career is another one. Work-life balance is another one of the factors that we measure and can look at. Having flexible work time, in some cases, is very important for some people to have flexible work time. Maybe they're a single parent or whatever, or they need to take care of their kids. And having that flexible work time can be very important, can be a great point of negotiation as well. Receiving diplomacy is another one. And having social opportunities is another one. These are their least popular ones. And receiving personal help, but some people have them, and it's very strong, and it's important to understand what those things are.
Dan, before you go to the app, the courses, talk a little bit about the self-discovery that happens from the employee's point of view when they have these 18 that they can take a look at and say what's important to them, and talk about just what happens in terms of their own discovery. In some cases, most likely for the first time that they're being asked, right? And so it's a very interesting thing that happens to the employee.
Yes. Well, let's say we'll take the example of advancement opportunities. So people say, I want advancement. Well, one of the key points of discovery is, well, for them is, well, what are the possible advancement opportunities in the organization? What do they look like? And what do they involve? And then on the personal level, what is it that you need, are going to typically need to get advancement in the organization? Like what behavioral competencies and what personal tendencies is going to likely get you advancement? And how do you develop those behavioral tendencies? So we'll take each of those and we'll create an explanation of why it's important. Then we'll look at the person's tendencies related to that. And then they'll have some suggestions as to how you can develop that competency or characteristic. And then there will be an activity that's designed to help facilitate that development for the individual employee. So it basically guides them through the process. And then it also, toward the end, it guides them through the process of how do you ask for advancement anyway? How would you approach it? And another one, for example, how do you ask for high pay is a really important one. And typically employees have no idea how to ask for high pay. They just walk up and say, I want a pay increase, right? And then if the manager asks them, well, okay, let me get clear on what you're doing, they'll give them a list of tasks or whatever that they're doing, but they won't really lay out in a professional way what is it that you've done, that warrants this pay increase. So part of the app is we coach them how to lay out your case. First of all, make a case to start with. So the first thing you have to do is make a case where you actually do earn it, you actually do warrant it, and then lay out, well, how do you make your case? How do you lay it out so it's clear, okay, this is why I think that I'm ready for a pay increase. And this is what I've done, and this is what I've achieved. These are the results I've achieved, and presented it in a way that's clear and concise, that the manager can get a hold of it and say, okay, well, I agree with this point, or I don't agree with this point. And they can have a discussion about those issues, or the manager can come back and say, well, this is great, but I think you're almost there, but I think you need to do this, this, and this in order to really get across the line. So it's a way of sort of delving into the details, right? Mm-hmm. So another example is you say, I want my opinions valued, right? So there's a whole series of things that you need to do in order to make your opinions more valuable, and that you can look at and say, well, do I research information before I start spouting my opinions, or do I, how good am I at analyzing, issues related to my opinions? How good am I at presenting it, presenting what my view is? How good am I at listening to opposing views, or enlisting opposing views? It walks people through a whole series of things that they need to look at to say, how can I make people value my opinions? So it's one thing to say, I want my opinions valued. It's another thing to say, how can I make my opinions more valuable? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we turn it on its head. We say, how can you make your opinions more valuable? And one of the things that you can do or avoid doing that's going to make people disvalue your opinions. So that's the whole process that we would walk people through. And so it's a learning process for the employee that's connected to what they want. So it's the most powerful learning process there is, because you're not just teaching people something about some subject they may or may not care about. You're teaching people about something that's important to them, that's the most important thing for them. And that's what they're going to sort of grab onto and really learn from and say, okay, I've got it, because they've got the motivation to really learn and understand that topic.
Right. One of the things that you've taught me is to help people evolve towards their wants. That there's nothing more powerful from a learning perspective than people evolving towards their wants. And that's something that this process facilitates.
Right. And there's nothing more engaging than what you want. You know?
Exactly.
If you're not engaged by what you want, you're not going to be engaged by anything, because because that's what, by definition, is your engagement, is what you want.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So in terms of the employee app, so it contains a mini course for each employment goal for each employee, and it presents the apps in the order in which they're most important to the employee. Employees' goals are listed in order of importance. The employee rates goal fulfillment. It's optional and anonymous, but they, for their own purpose, can look at, okay, how fulfilled is this? And each mini course is personalized based on the employee's behaviors. So no two courses are ever the same. So whatever you tend to, your types of your behaviors that you tend to have, the course is built around that. And it's built around core concepts, but it then draws in your tendencies and how you approach it. So, for example, if I have very low self-motivation, that's gonna be a pretty weak point in getting me to earn higher pay. So that's going to be a point that I'm going to want to address in the app. But on the other hand, if the person is very highly motivated, that's a very strong point. And all you have to do then is make sure that it's done in a way where they're not going to burn out, or they're not going to, stomp on other people in order to get what they want. So, so you're basically taking what the person's natural tendencies are, and you're crafting the course of how to get that goal in relationship to their natural tendencies. Okay. So the employee receives an analysis of their behaviors related to the goals, and they're guided to achieve their goals based on their own behaviors. Employees are guided in how to approach their manager as well. So typically at the end of it, it's like, okay, this is how you would typically want to make this request to the manager. Employee receives practical exercises and activities for specific goals, right? So, and then once prepared, the employee requests a meeting with the manager. So the manager's not being bothered the whole time they're doing this with, lots of requests and ideas and having to deal with a lot of issues. Employees are going to come prepared and ready to talk about the most important things for them. And after the meeting, decisions are made and recorded within the app, so everybody can see, okay, this is what we talked about, and this is what we decided on this issue. So this is a view of what the app looks like. And you can see here, for example, this is just a sample of 3 items, but you can see here you got wants development is your top one in this case. And the the course connected to that is called How to Gain Development Opportunities. And you can see this person rated their fulfillment as 6 of this, and which means that they'd like to have more. And since it's their top one, that's really important because, well, it's only a 6 in terms of fulfillment, but it's their most important goal. So we're going to put that right up to the top. And you can see these things down at underneath here is these are the agreements. So after you've made agreements with the manager, those will get recorded in this thing here, which is a link to their system. And both the manager and the employee can see what's in the agreement. And the same with commitments. So after the employee gets agreed with development opportunities, they're going to make a commitment on specific actions that they need to take related to those opportunities, and that gets recorded there. So you can see, like, once high pay, there's, 3 interaction points that can occur with the manager. With the once development, there's 2, and once capable leader, there's a bit more. And that's true for each one. So each one of these items here, they're interaction points, basically. Okay. So with the manager app, the manager can actually invite the employees into the app. So HR doesn't even have to do it. You can just invite the managers in, and they'll invite their own employees into it. And the HR can import the employees and their managers with a bulk invite, and it just starts the whole process. Everybody gets a link to go into their app. No actions needed until a request from the employee is received. Manager reviews the request, organizes a meeting. The request is discussed and results are determined. Results are recorded in the app. So here's an example, a snapshot out of it in terms of employee development. This is once development. And just to give you an example of the steps that a person would take in one's development. So the first thing that they would do is we explore the employee's clarity about their career goals. So we have questions in the questionnaire that'll help us to see whether the employee has clear goals or not. And if they don't, we share that with them, give them an opportunity to explore their career goals. So whether or not how clear they are, they're still going to go through a clarification process to really, write down exactly, well, what is their career goals? What are their career goals? Because understanding the career goals is very important to be able to understand the development opportunities that you need to achieve those career goals. So otherwise, you're going to have development opportunities that are misdirected and not going to what the career goals are. So the first step we'll have employees do is to clarify their career goals. Then we're going to analyze needed development to reach those goals. So the employee is going to be able to look at what's the development that they need in order to reach those goals. And what's the employee's tendencies related to self-improvement. So, and if they're weak in self-improvement, how do they increase it? So we give them some guidance with that. We explore the specific self-improvement that they need to reach their specific career goals. And then we explore the development opportunities offered. So what are the development opportunities in the organization? What do they know about, at least? And we explore development opportunities that they need. So they might say, well, it's not offered, but I'd like to have this specific development opportunity. And then they order those in terms of which are the most important. And then they send a request to the manager and to discuss development opportunities. And then the manager and the employee discusses those opportunities. It's thought through very well from the employee side, so it's easy for the manager to look at the opportunities. And then they come to terms, and it may be that the manager will say, well, you can have this opportunity, but I'll give you time to do it, but we're not going to pay for it, or we'll pay for it, we'll offer it. Or it can be, you might have to earn it to do certain specific things. So it's up to the manager to then deal with, how to implement the development opportunities. So they agree on the opportunities, it gets documented, and then you explore the initiatives needed to benefit from the opportunities. And then the employee commits to actions with the manager. So if you look at the app from the manager side, the manager would get, they would review the career goals and clarity. So when they get pinged, they look at, okay, what I understand what your career goals are. They look at, well, can they be achieved in the organization? And if so, how? They review the desired opportunities that they're requesting. and the clarity and clarify if needed. So they look at that. Then they say, honestly, if they're available in the organization, or if they're willing to do them, even if they're not, to add them to it. If not, indicate if they could be obtained outside the organization. They indicate if the organization is willing to pay for it, the opportunities. Then they say if they'll be undertaken during work time or not. These are the things that the manager would be need to clarify. So they just get a list of these things here. And then, do they need to earn them? If so, what do they need to do? Note their current opportunities. So maybe they have development opportunities that they already have, and they make a note of that. And give them a little clue. Don't try to implement too many at the same time. Creates a lot of confusion. And then they review the commitments of the employee and then get started. So everybody gets sort of clarified about how to handle their part of the interaction. That's for both the employee and the manager. So in terms of the benefits to HR, after the initial introduction, which they'll need to explain to everybody, the employees actually drive the program themselves. So they go through the process, they walk through it, they drive, they create their own readiness, and then they let the manager know when they're ready. And then the managers take over from there. It covers multiple major factors all at once. So it drives employee engagement, simultaneously creates leadership development, creates retention, creates engagement, and it creates clarity around succession as well, because they'll be the ones that are interested in succession will come up on wanting advancement. Okay, it enables focus on the critical issues. So the automation enables HR to intervene where it's needed, but for the most part, it won't be needed because it'll be worked through between the employee and the manager. And it retains your best talent, so it reduces hiring needs. It's also connected with the organizational analytics that we have in the system as well. So you're able to, for example, identify risks, people who are at risk of not being retained in the organization. If they're your key players, you really would like to know that. So it covers a lot of bases. It's not just simply an engagement program. It does management training. It does employee development. It is a lead into succession. It handles retention. So it covers a lot of ground for the HR, and also supports the hiring process because it reduces hiring needs.